the Iliad, Book 8. This is Your Mythology Book Club with Daniel Lucas Murphy.
Welcome to Your Mythology Book Club. I'm your host, Daniel. In this series, we're doing a very close reading of the Iliad, one book at a time. This is episode 8, and so we'll cover Book 8. By listening to this entire podcast series, you will gain a thorough understanding and appreciation of the Iliad. As always, I'll be reading the text of the Iliad to you from the translation by Lang, Leaf, and Myers, interspersed with my own interpretations and those of various scholars whose works you will find referenced in the show notes. The Iliad comes to us from the depths of time. It was ancient to the ancients, who collected it from among even older stories and compiled it into the version we have. This means it's an artifact of literary culture that has been filtered through the minds of people from multiple time periods, each of which represent cultures far different from our own. Therefore, I'll go on tangents to explore some of the more confusing or intriguing historical, religious, and cultural points we'll come across. I'm not a professional scholar, but I am a very well-read amateur who has read various translations of the Iliad many, many times over the years. How I present the Iliad to you in this series is exactly how I read it each time, appreciating the language, enjoying the story, but also frequently pausing to ask, why? Why are the characters doing these strange things? What about their time in history, their culture, or religion would make them want to have done what they just did? Over the years, I've taken my questions to the scholarly literature and have been able to gain more and more insight with each question I've researched. Throughout this series, I'll share these insights with you. Getting a handle on why the characters in the Iliad are doing some of the things they're doing will help us understand their motivations. Seeing their motivations in the light of their own time period, culture, and religion will allow us to discover the very human story that forms the heart of the Iliad. Before moving on to Book 8, let's start with a quick recap of Book 7, which was an important juncture in the course of the Iliad that sets the stage for the upcoming intense battle books, 8 through 15, which I call the deep core of the Iliad. In addition to being an important juncture, Book 7 was also a strange book in terms of its content, a real hodgepodge of events that brought us to where we are now. 7 began with Hector and his brother Alexandros returning to the battle, which had continued to rage right outside the walls of Troy during their absence in Book 6, and their return to battle was very successful. Too successful, according to Athene, who had not at all been placated by the offerings which the Trojans had just made to her, offerings which had been the reason for Hector having stepped away from the battle in the first place. However, Hector's digression into the city hadn't been a total waste of time, as he had roused Alexandros to rejoin him in battle, and together, their return had so heartened the Trojans that the Greeks were now being pushed back away from the walls. Athene rushed down from the heavenly heights of Olympus to put a stop to the Trojans' successful defense of the city. But Apollo met her there on the battlefield to defy her and defend the Trojans. These two gods were invisible to the men fighting around them as they came to a compromise. Apollo would incite Hector to offer to meet any Greek in single combat. This worked for Athene because it put a stop to the Trojans' advance against the Greeks and kept the battle line near the city where she wanted it. Hector dutifully offered to duel any Greek, and after a couple embarrassing moments when no Greek was willing to step forward and face him, finally the duel commenced between Hector and Telamonian Aias, the second best Greek warrior after Achilles. This duel was a callback to a previous one in Book 3, when Menelaus and Alexandros fought for Helen, her treasure, and a resolution to the war. That duel had been interrupted by Aphrodite, and its outcome left uncertain. Later, Athene incited the Trojans to breach their oath of peace, and all hope for a peaceful settlement to the conflict had been dashed. The duel in 7 didn't have any such high stakes. In Book 7, Hector and Aias were simply dueling to defeat one another. But it did remind everyone of that lost hope for peace. The Book 7 duel also ended up inconclusive. Aias had been winning when the heralds of both sides came up and said, "It's getting dark, guys. Time to call it a day." Hector and Aias had left off with the idea that they would resume fighting in the future. but I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for that, as Zeus would later show he had other plans for the next stages of the war. That evening, the hope for peace was briefly renewed, as the Trojans had a debate among themselves where they rejected the idea of returning Helen to the Greeks, but were willing to offer back all her treasure. And Alexandros offered to make partial amends by adding some of his own treasure to the Greeks as well, in an effort to buy a permanent peace settlement. Separate from this offer for a permanent peace, the Trojans also sent word to the Greeks that they'd like at least to have a temporary truce in order to collect and bury their dead who were still lying on the battlefield. The Trojan herald carried these two separate offers to the Greek leadership, but he really bungled the job, and as a result, Diomedes led the Greeks in interpreting the permanent peace offer as a sign of Trojan weakness. Sensing that they were just a little ways off from total victory, the Greeks roundly rejected the peace offer, but they did agree to a temporary truce for funerals. Next in the hodgepodge sequence of Book 7, the Greeks decided to build a massive series of fortifications around their camp, consisting of a wall, a spike-filled ditch, and watchtowers, possibly motivated by their newfound notion of pursuing a total victory over the Trojans. But that's interpreting their motivations and the author's intentions very generously. Honestly, the timing of the fortifications being built now, 10 years into the war, is more credibly viewed as a narrative flaw in the Iliad that's baffled readers for millennia. The final event of Book 7, which, along with the rejection of the peace offer, makes Book 7 the turning point leading to the next several books of the Iliad being a particularly intense and vitriolic series, is what Zeus does at the very end of Book 7. While both the Trojans in their city and the Greeks in their camp are feasting and drinking the night away, Zeus is up in heaven, thunder rumbling, gathering storms as he plots trouble for the combatants on both sides of this war, Trojan and Greek. The mortal men pour libations on the ground in a futile effort to soothe Zeus, who is up all night planning what's about to happen in Book 8. Book 8 will open with Zeus having completed his plan to cause trouble for the human combatants in the war. In fact, the restoration of Zeus's dominance, not only of the human combatants, but also over his fellow gods and of the entire course of the war, is the central theme of Book 8. And the more you understand that, the more you'll get out of 8. But 8 is not just about restoring Zeus's dominance. It's also about clearly defining what has kept Zeus from fulfilling his goal up until this point, or rather, who has been in Zeus's way and why Zeus will no longer be stopped from this point on. This is important for us because Zeus's motivation is also our motivation. Zeus wants us all to get back on the main plot of the Iliad. Let's get into my Zeus and the thorn in his side theory of Book 8, which will explain why we've had such a lengthy digression from books 2 through 7, why that digression is over, and, this is key, confirm that we are clearly back on track toward the main plot goal of the Iliad. This confirmation will help us understand why these next several books of the Iliad are so dark, so intense. Book 8, while not at all the hodgepodge of disparate events that Book 7 was, can still come across as a little confusing without a proper understanding of its theme. In fact, Book 8 is similar to Book 7 in that both have been criticized for being, well, kind of sloppy. Specifically, some of the complaints about 8 have been that it shows a reversal of fortunes too hastily, that the motivations of its characters, mortal and divine, are poorly drawn, and that it's not well integrated into the rest of the text. If you're thinking about things from the perspective of the human combatants, these criticisms can make sense. A cursory glance at 8's events might suggest the mortals have forgotten about what they were doing recently. For instance, there's no further mention of resuming the duel between Hector and Aias. And for this important event of the previous book to not even get another mention here upon the resumption of battle is odd. However, a deeper look shows that Book 8 only seems to have the aforementioned problems if you don't have a solid grasp on how very, very Zeus-centric every single thing about it is really. Book 8 is best read from Zeus's point of view. But unlike Book 7, where I went out on a limb and created my own unified theory of Book 7 to explain what was going on there, here in Book 8 I have solid scholarship backing me up. For my Zeus and the Thorn in His Side theory, I'm heavily indebted to scholar Irwin Cook and his paper titled On the Importance of Iliad Book 8. This is a scholar whose work I've cited previously. His work on Agamemnon's test of the army in Book 2 was pivotal to my understanding of that mysteriously motivated act. I'll make several references to Cook's paper throughout this episode, as well as to a number of other scholars. So what exactly is Zeus's motivation with this big new plan he was up all night working on? Zeus's motivation is exactly the same as the main plot of the Iliad. It's worth a moment to remind ourselves what this is as we emerge from the lengthy digression of books 2 through 7, and before we plunge into the deep core of 8 through 15, which can feel like another digression if we don't have our bearings. The opening lines of the Iliad are not only iconic for their beauty, but also for their perfectly succinct summary of this meandering epic's main plot. Sing, goddess, the wrath of Achilles, Peleus' son, the ruinous wrath that brought on the Achaeans woes innumerable, and hurled down into Hades many strong souls of heroes, and gave their bodies to be a prey to dogs and all winged fowls. And so the counsel of Zeus wrought out its accomplishment from the day when first strife parted Atrides, king of men, and noble Achilles. The wrath of Achilles, that's what we're following in the Iliad. Think back now to Book 1 and the wrathful prayer of Achilles, relayed to Zeus via Achilles' mother, the sea goddess Thetis, which Zeus had solemnly promised to fulfill. Achilles' wrath is the linchpin upon which the whole Iliad turns, and Zeus is committed to bringing Achilles' prayer of wrath and revenge to fulfillment. Achilles prayed for Zeus to bring suffering upon the Greeks, for Agamemnon having insulted him. But what's happened so far, really, in the Iliad? Ask yourself, have the Greeks been suffering? Really? No, not really. The Greeks have been doing pretty darn well so far. What's kept the Greeks from suffering and Zeus from fulfilling his promise has been one man. And we will see a lot of that one man in this book. And once we reach him, we'll learn more about what makes him so special and why he is the thorn in Zeus's side. Zeus will overwhelm the minds of almost all the humans, putting courage into some, panic into others, and driving out any thoughts or motivations other than his own from everyone's minds. Everyone's, that is, except one special person, whose prominence in this book serves to illustrate exactly why Zeus is having to intervene so directly right now. When you see that one man who is immune to Zeus's power to overwhelm the minds of mortals, you will know that man to be the thorn in Zeus's side, the man who has single-handedly kept Zeus and us from seeing the fulfillment of Achilles' wrath. The purpose of all the trials the Greeks are about to face in the deep core of the Iliad is Zeus fulfilling Achilles' prayer for revenge upon Agamemnon for insulting him back in Book 1. Will any amount of suffering faced by his comrades cause Achilles to relent? We shall see. Let's begin now with Book 8. Now dawn, the saffron-robed, was spreading over all the earth, and Zeus, whose joy is in the thunder, let call an assembly of the gods upon the topmost peak of many-ridged Olympus, and himself made harangue to them, and all the gods gave ear. Hearken to me, all gods and all ye goddesses, that I may tell you that my heart within my breast commands me. One thing let none essay, be it goddess or be it god, to wit, to thwart my saying. Approve ye it all together, that with all speed I may accomplish these things. Whomsoever I shall perceive minded to go, apart from the gods, to succor Trojans or Danaans, chastened in no seemly wise shall he return to Olympus. Or I take and cast him into misty Tartarus, right far away, where is the deepest gulf beneath the earth. There are the gate of iron and the threshold of bronze, as far beneath Hades as heaven is high above the earth. Then shall ye know how far I am mightiest of all gods. Go to now, ye gods, make trial, that ye all may know. Fasten ye a rope of gold from heaven, and all ye gods, lay hold thereof, and all goddesses. Yet could ye not drag from heaven to earth Zeus, counselor supreme, not though ye toiled sore. But once I likewise were minded to draw with all my heart, then should I draw you up with the very earth and sea withal. Thereafter would I bind the rope about a pinnacle of Olympus, and so should all those things be hung in air. By so much am I beyond gods and beyond men. Book 8 opens with dawn over Olympus, Zeus calling the gods to assemble in the throne room of his palace high atop Mount Olympus. He's got something new to tell the other gods, a new plan, a resolution he's made during his night-long vigil atop the mountain. And they won't be happy to hear it. Zeus doesn't want any of the other gods to help out either side in the war, starting right now. I'm going to be doing all the manipulation myself. Me. This will be a change from what we've seen so far, which has involved gods inciting mortals to fight and whisking their favorites off the battlefield when they're in danger. Zeus makes the penalty for disobeying him really clear. He'll either smite that god, who will return to Olympus chastened in no seemly wise, as our translation here puts it, or in bad shape, as Peter Green more simply translates it. But smiting is not the only penalty Zeus might impose on gods who dare to violate his ban on participation in the war. Zeus says he might, and this is much worse than being smited, Zeus might throw violating gods into Tartaros. Tartaros, that's hell for gods. As you can imagine, Tartaros is an interesting place. The way I picture it, it's kind of a prison below Hades. And we get references here and there throughout Greek mythology to Tartaros as being a place where Zeus kept the gods who were his enemies. These would have mostly been the Titans, the previous generation of gods who were defeated by Zeus and his allies in the war that placed Zeus on his throne. We also find in Tartaros a strange class of gods who are just too powerful to be left on the loose, but who are released temporarily now and then to quash rebellions against Zeus. And these are the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed gods, who seem to be both wardens and inmates of Tartaros. Hesiod, the other pillar of early Greek poetry alongside Homer, writes of Tartaros in his Theogony. The Titans were defeated by the gods and confined within the pit of Tartaros. The 100-handed Hecatoncheires overshadowed the Titans with their missiles, and buried them beneath the wide path to earth, and bound them in bitter chains when they had conquered them by their strength, for all their great spirit, as far beneath the earth to Tartaros. For a brazen anvil falling down from heaven 9 nights and days would reach the earth upon the 10th. And again, a brazen anvil falling from earth 9 nights and days would reach Tartaros upon the 10th. Round it runs a fence of bronze, and night spreads in triple line all about it like a neck circlet, while above grow the roots of the earth and unfruitful sea. There, by the counsel of Zeus, who drives the clouds, the Titan gods are hidden under misty gloom, in a dank place where are the ends of the huge earth. And they may not go out, for Poseidon fixed gates of bronze upon it, and a wall runs all around it on every side. There the Hecatoncheires, Gyes, and Kotos, and great-souled Obrius live, trusty warders of Zeus, who holds the aegis. And indeed, in his speech, Zeus also made reference to the great depth of Tartaros, as deep below the earth as heaven is above it. And to demonstrate how serious he is, Zeus proposes a tug of war, him alone against all the other gods. And he insists that they all together wouldn't be able to pull him down from heaven. But once he chose to pull, he would be able to pull up not only the other gods, but the very earth itself and the sea as well. This guy is serious about keeping the other gods out of the war from now on. His rant here reminds me a little of the Festivus episode of Seinfeld, Zeus challenging his family to feats of strength. What an awkward time for the Olympian family right now. So said he, and they all kept silence and were still, marveling at his saying, for he spake very masterfully. But at last there spake to them the bright-eyed goddess Athene. O our father Cronades, supreme of lords, well we know, even we, that thy might is unyielding. Yet still have we pity for the Danaan spearmen, that now shall perish and fulfill a grievous fate. Yet we will refrain from battle as thou biddest us. But counsel we will offer to the Argives for their profit, that they perish not all at thy fury. Then Zeus the cloud-gatherer smiled at her and said, Be of good comfort, dear child, Trito-born. I speak not at all of earnest purpose, but I am minded to be kindly to thee. With these threats, the gods all go silent, except of course Athene, who respectfully still insists that she will offer advice to the Greeks, not asking, just telling her father that's what she'll do. And after all his threats, Zeus responds to her that he's not angry with her and means only kindness towards her. Athene is his favorite, and she can do no wrong in his eyes. So saying, he let harness to his chariot his bronze-shod horses, fleet of foot, with flowing manes of gold, and himself clad him with gold upon his flesh, and grasped the whip of gold, well wrought, and mounted upon his car, and lashed the horses to start them, and they, nothing loth, sped on between earth and starry heaven. So fared he to many-fountain Ida, mother of wild beasts, even unto Gargaros, where is his domain and fragrant altar. There did the father of men and gods stay his horses, and unloose them from the car, and cast thick mist about them, and himself sate upon the mountain tops, rejoicing in his glory, to behold the city of the Trojans and ships of the Achaeans. Next, Zeus goes down to the war himself. He gets on his chariot and flies down to Mount Ida, specifically the peak of Ida known as Gargaros, which is above Troy, where he can manipulate the action directly and get a good view. Now the flowing-haired Achaeans took meat hastily among the huts, and thereafter arrayed themselves. Likewise the Trojans on their side armed them throughout the town, a smaller host, yet for all that were they eager to fight in battle, of forceful need, for their children's sake and their wives. And the gates were opened wide, and the host issued forth, footmen and horsemen, and mighty din arose. So when they were met together, and come unto one spot, then clashed they targe and spear, and fury of bronze-clad warrior. The bossed shields pressed each on each, and mighty din arose. Then were heard the voice of groaning, and the voice of triumph together of the slayers and the slain, and the earth streamed with blood. The day begins, the day that battle is to resume. The agreed-upon duration of the temporary truce for burying the dead is over. The gates of Troy open, and armed men stream forth. Their numbers are noted to be fewer than the Greeks, but all the more motivated to fight, because their own wives and children are right behind them within those walls. The Greeks are assembled on the plain to meet them, and soon they clash, the sounds of sword upon shield. Now while it yet was morn, and the divine day waxed, so long from either side lighted the darts amain, and the people fell. But when the sun bestrode mid-heaven, then did the Father balance his golden scales, and put therein two fates of death that layeth men at their length, one for horse-taming Trojans, one for mail-clad Achaeans. And he took the scale-yard by the midst, and lifted it, and the Achaeans' day of destiny sank down. So lay the Achaeans' fate on the bounteous earth, and the Trojans' fates were lifted up toward wide heaven. And the god thundered aloud from Ida, and sent his blazing flash amid the host of the Achaeans. And they saw and were astonished, and pale fear gat hold upon all. Until noon in battle, the two sides were even, and the battle was a raging stalemate. But then at noon, Zeus took out his golden scales. This seems to be some kind of divining tool, a way for Zeus to learn the will of the fates, or perhaps to control fate. It's unclear, given that gods in ancient mythology were both the personification of and the providers of various things. Cause and effect can be muddled. Think about it. Zeus's will is fate, and yet the fates are his daughters. None can defy a god who alone is stronger than all the others, and yet rebellions are referred to within the Iliad, as well as references to prophecies of Zeus's eventual downfall. And so without our truly being able to understand this as anything other than a way of visualizing the reversal of fortunes in battle, Zeus weighs the fates of the two sides using these golden scales. and Troy came out on top. This is the beginning of the fulfillment of Zeus's promise to Achilles, the end of the digression of books 2 through 7. Thunder and lightning surround the crag of Gargaros, and bolts of lightning blast down upon the Greeks. These are sure signs of Zeus's anger, and the Greeks panic. Of course, we would normally see, however, at this reversal of fortunes in the war, one particular warrior out in the forefront, the Promachos, who would lead the charge or the retreat. But this seems different. It feels even more arbitrary than usual, Zeus pulling out these golden scales. This is our first sense of just how unfair things are becoming for the Greeks. We as the audience are assumed to be Greek sympathizers, and we had been winning through our strength of arms and our superior numbers. And now Zeus just pulls out these golden scales and we suddenly start losing? This is enraging. This is unfair. This is a stupid and arbitrary way to lose. Then had Idomeneus no heart to stand, neither Agamemnon, neither stood the twain Iantes, men of Ares' company. Only Nestor of Gerenia stood his ground, he the warden of the Achaeans. Neither he of purpose, but his horse was fordone, which noble Alexandros, beauteous-haired Helen's lord, had smitten with an arrow upon the top of the crest, where the foremost hairs of horses grow upon the skull. And there is the most deadly spot. So the horse leapt up in anguish, and the arrow sank into his brain, and he brought confusion on the steeds as he writhed upon the earth. While the old man leaped forth, and with his sword began to hew the traces, came Hector's fleet horses through the tumult, being a bold charioteer, even Hector. At the falling of the scales and the blasts of Zeus's lightning, the Greek heroes Idomeneus, Agamemnon, and the two Aiases flee the battle in panic. We're to imagine a general panic, an uncontrolled retreat of the Greeks. Old Nestor stays, not because he isn't panicking too. He's terrified like the rest of them, but he can't get away because Alexandros, Prince of Troy, struck one of his horses with an arrow, upsetting his chariot and tangling him in the gear that harnesses the horses and chariot together. So Nestor is desperately trying to cut himself free from this gear when just then Hector looms up over the elderly warrior, ready to kill him, helpless, entangled with his dead horse. This scene has been referred to by at least one scholar as the Nestor Bedragnis, a German term meaning distress or hardship. We have no Promachos at this point, and it seems to just be a general rout of the Greeks. Everyone is running away, every man for himself. Every man except one. And now had the old man lost his life, but that Diomedes of the loud war cry was swift to mark. Terribly shouted he, summoning Odysseus. Heaven-born son of Laertes, Odysseus of many wiles, whither fleest thou with thy back turned, like a coward in the throng? Beware, lest as thou fleest, one plant a spear between thy shoulders. Nay, stand thy ground, till we thrust back from the old man, his furious foe. Diomedes appears, standing firm by Nestor as the others are all fleeing for the ships. He calls out to his friend Odysseus to help him save Nestor. Diomedes is alone in remaining immune to the panic that's afflicted all the others. What's unique about Diomedes? So spake he, but much enduring noble Odysseus heard him not, but hastened by to the hollow ships of the Achaeans. Yet Tydides, though but one, mingled amid the fighters in the forefront, and took his stand before the steeds of the old man, Neleus' son, and spake to him winged words, and said, Old man, of a truth, young warriors beset thee hard, and thy force is abated, and old age is sore upon thee, and thy squire is but a weakling, and thy steeds are slow. Come then, mount my car, that thou mayest see of what sort are the steeds of Tros, well skilled for following or fleeing hither or thither, very fleetly across the plain, even those that erst I took from Aeneas, inspirer of fear. Thine let our squires tend, and let us guide straight against the horse-taming Trojans, that even Hector may know whether my spear also rageth in my hands. Odysseus is said to not even hear Diomedes' call for help, and runs right past Diomedes and Nestor, trapped by the chariot horses, to his dead horse in a scene, the Nestor Bedragnis, which can be seen as kind of humorous. Diomedes and Odysseus are often paired together, So having them cross paths now is an illustration of the differences in their characters, which can help us start to understand what's unique about Diomedes. Odysseus is too smart to stick around, while the full scope of the Nestor Bidrangus will illustrate for us exactly what's so unique about Diomedes. This fleeing Odysseus portion of the scene demonstrates how well integrated Book 8 really is with the rest of the text. Erwin Cook points out that this fleeing was foreshadowed in Agamemnon's review of the troops in Book 4, when Odysseus said to Agamemnon that we will see him among the Promachoi, or those forefront in battle. That certainly is true. We are getting a glimpse, a very quick glimpse, of Odysseus among the Promachoi, Diomedes and Nestor, as he flees the forefront. In fact, the specific order of retreat given here in 8 is exactly the reverse of that troop review order in Book 4. With Odysseus and the other leaders having fled, Diomedes must defend Nestor alone amid the attacking Trojans. He calls for Nestor to get into his chariot. The entire Nestor Bidrangus, consisting of Nestor's horses being killed and having him be rescued by a younger warrior, is apparently very similar to a scene in the Aethiopus, which was another of the epics within the same cycle, of which only the Iliad and the Odyssey have survived to modern times in their entirety. So this similarity to another scene, along with the general belief that the Iliad is older than the Aethiopus, has made critics dismiss the Bidrangus as a later addition to the Iliad. I don't think there's any reason to believe that. The text of the Iliad, the text of the Odyssey, and the texts of the other epics that have since been lost were all assembled from earlier oral traditions. When one text was committed to paper, had no bearing on how old the stories themselves were. We can imagine that the more popular stories may have been written down earlier, and we can be fairly confident that the more popular a story was, the more copies of it were made, increasing its chances of having survived to modern times. Rather than getting into a debate over when originally oral stories got written down, what we should be focusing on is that Diomedes rescuing Nestor gives the narrator a reason to have Diomedes continue in the fight despite the opposition of Zeus. This is pious disobedience of Zeus that Diomedes is engaging in right now. Disobedience that is being tolerated by Zeus. And you can tell that this is pious disobedience because there is no sign that Zeus is not tolerating what Diomedes is doing right now. Later, Diomedes will get a signal that continued fighting will be impious at that point. And Diomedes will then respond appropriately to that signal. So let's summarize what we know so far about Diomedes' uniqueness. This now consists of 2 facts. 1, Diomedes is immune to the panic that Zeus has spread among the Greeks. And 2, his disobedience, that is, his continued fighting while all the other Greeks are fleeing, is being tolerated by Zeus. So said he, and knightly Nestor of Gerenia disregarded not. Then the 2 squires tended Nestor's horses, even Sthenelus the valiant, and kindly Eurymedon, and the other twain both mounted upon Diomedes' car. And Nestor took into his hands the shining reins, and lashed the horses, and soon they drew nigh Hector. Then Tydeus' son hurled at him as he charged straight upon them. Him missed he, but his squire that drave his chariot, Enopeus, high-hearted Thebaeus' son, even him, as he held the reins, he smote upon the breast beside the nipple. So he fell from out the car, and his fleet-foot horses swerved aside, and there his soul and spirit were unstrung. Then sore grief encompassed Hector's soul for sake of his charioteer. Yet left he him there lying, though he sorrowed for his comrade, and made quest for a bold charioteer, and his horses lacked not long for a master. For anon he found Iphitos' son, bold Archeptolemus, and him he made mount beside his fleet horses, and gave the reins into his hands. So Nestor gets into Diomedes' chariot, while Diomedes' men, Sthenelus and Eurymedon, looked after Nestor's surviving horses, presumably leading them out of the fight. Nestor mounts upon Diomedes' chariot, taking Sthenelus and Eurymedon's place as Diomedes' chariot driver. In doing so, Nestor has gone from victim to attacker. So they, Diomedes and Nestor together, wheel the chariot around and charge at Hector. Diomedes launches his spear at Hector, and this throw misses Hector but kills his chariot driver. And this is only a very temporary slowdown for Hector, who has to take a beat to find someone else to do his driving for him, so that his hands can remain free to attack. However, it doesn't take Hector very long at all to find a new driver, and the showdown between Hector and Diomedes resumes almost immediately. Then had destruction come, and deeds beyond remedy been wrought. And so had they been penned in Ilios like lambs, had not the Father of gods and men been swift to mark. So he thundered terribly, and darted his white lightning, and hurled it before Diomedes' steeds to earth. And there arose a terrible flame of sulfur burning, and the two horses were affrighted, and cowered beneath the car. Listen to what the narrator just said. Then had destruction come, and deeds beyond remedy been wrought, and so had they been penned in Ilios like lambs. Diomedes was about to, as a solitary warrior, with only Nestor to drive his chariot, chase all the Trojans off the field and trap them within the city of Troy. Diomedes alone! Diomedes is the thorn in Zeus's side. Zeus throws a lightning bolt into the ground right in front of Diomedes' chariot to stop this from happening. The horses are hiding underneath the chariot somehow, like shivering, like in some cartoonish fashion. It doesn't even make sense. It's not even an image I can place in my mind. And then the shining reins dropped from Nestor's hands, and he was afraid at heart and spake to Diomedes, "Come now, Tydides, turn back thy whole-hooved horses to flight. Seest thou not that victory from Zeus attendeth not on thee? Now doth Cronus' son vouchsafe glory to this Hector for the day. Hereafter he shall grant it us likewise, if he will. A man may not at all fight against the will of Zeus, not though one be very valiant. He, verily, is mightier far." Nestor doesn't need to be the wise old Nestor to understand this omen. Zeus clearly wants them to stop fighting the Trojans, and says so to Diomedes. I'm impressed with Nestor for even being able to speak coherently. Zeus just threw lightning almost right at them. The stench of sulfur is in the air, the horses are hiding underneath them, and he's still capable of forming a coherent sentence. I don't think I could. Then Diomedes of the loud war cry answered him, "Yea, verily, old man, all this thou sayest is according unto right. But this is the sore grief that entereth my heart and soul. Hector some day shall say, as he maketh harangue among the Trojans, Tydides betook him to the ships in flight before my face. So shall he boast. In that day let the wide earth yawn for me." Then knightly Nestor of Gerenia answered him, "Ah me, thou son of wise Tydeus, that thou shouldest speak on this wise. Even though Hector call thee a base man and coward, yet will not the Trojans hearken to him, nor the Dardanians, neither the wives of the great-hearted men of Troy, bearers of the shield, the wives whose lusty bedfellows thou hast laid low in the dust." Diomedes just isn't fazed by Zeus, by the lightning, by none of it. His main concern right now is about his honor. This is a difficult decision for Diomedes to consider retreating. On the one hand, he's just received a very clear signal from Zeus that any further fighting back will not be tolerated, and further disobedience would be impious. On the other hand, his honor is the most important thing to him. And if this is the last the Trojans, and Hector specifically, ever see of him, he'd almost rather it be an image of him coming at them, spear in hand, as Zeus causes the earth to swallow him up, rather than it be an image of him running away. And not sure if you caught it, but the method of death Diomedes says he would prefer to this loss of honor is exactly the way his father died, being swallowed alive into the underworld. Author Dean Hammer, in his paper, The Cultural Construction of Chance in the Iliad, talks about this scene in particular. As we've previously discussed, chance didn't really exist for the ancients, not in the way we think of it as a simple mathematical randomness. Chance for the ancients consisted of gods communicating their wills to people, the changing and capricious will of the gods. These are always points where honor can be bestowed and taken away, and the possibility exists for a gap between the honor one deserves and the honor one actually has. At this moment, considering the consequences of accepting Zeus's decision, Diomedes fears that one day Hector will taunt him with having fled. Nestor tells Diomedes that even if Hector later calls him a coward, no one will believe him. Is honor the opinion just one other man has of you? No, it seems to be that of a whole group, and it must be a reasonably held opinion of a whole group. So spake he, and turned the whole-hooved horses to flight, back through the tumult. And the Trojans and Hector with wondrous uproar poured upon them their dolorous darts. Heeding Zeus's warning, Diomedes and Hector do turn their chariot back away from the city of Troy. And over him shouted loudly great Hector of the glancing helm, Tydides, the fleet horse Danaans were wont to honor thee with the highest place, and meats, and cups brimful, but now they will disdain thee. Thou art, after all, no better than a woman. Begone, poor puppet, not for my flinching shalt thou climb on our towers, neither carry our wives away upon thy ships. Ere that will I deal thee thy fate. So said he, and Tydides was of divided mind, whether to wheel his horses and fight him face to face. Thrice doubted he in heart and soul, and thrice from Ida's mountains thundered Zeus, the Lord of counsel, and gave to the Trojans a sign, the turning of the course of battle. But Diomedes was right. He does get taunted by Hector, and it happens not someday, but today, right as he and Nestor are prudently and piously fleeing the battle. Hector shouts out to Diomedes that the Greeks will no longer honor him. We're meant to really feel for Diomedes here, who is only reluctantly leaving the battle. We're also meant to be enraged at how unjust Hector's taunting is, how undeserved his dominance in battle right now is. We're meant to be as much angered at Hector as we are sympathetic of Diomedes. Diomedes certainly is reluctant to leave the battle. 3 times Diomedes wants to go back to face Hector, but each time the thunder of Zeus breaks forth, letting him know it's a bad idea. This is Zeus reading Diomedes' mind, seeing the disobedience before it's even acted upon, and thundering and warning. The thrice-repeated desire of Diomedes to continue fighting. With Zeus's thunder each time is our narrative signal that retreat is no longer cowardly, but necessary in the context of obedience to the gods. The virtue of being an impetuous warrior is coming right up against the virtue of obeying an angry god in a real Bronze Age moral dilemma. There aren't many times in the Iliad that characters are shown with any sort of inner debate at all, and this is one of those few times. How can Diomedes even be debating this question still? He almost just got struck by lightning. We finally, though, have our answer as to what makes Diomedes unique. It emerged in this purely interior, psychological interaction between Diomedes and Zeus. This example of inner debate is unique in the entire Iliad, according to scholar Stephen Scully, because there is no con argument in Diomedes' mind, only the pro, only the impulse to fight. Diomedes has no consideration of his own mortality at all. Diomedes is truly the ideal, impulsive warrior hero. He has no flaws. Diomedes is the thorn in Zeus's side. So why doesn't Zeus just smite Diomedes and be done with it? It's not that easy. Zeus doesn't want to do anything directly to stop Diomedes because Diomedes lacks any of the character flaws that mar the other heroes. Achilles' rage, Agamemnon's greed, Hector's boastfulness. Diomedes went through an extended Aristeia that consumed all of books 5 and 6. He had innumerable opportunities to fall into the pit of rage which had consumed his father, and he passed every test, including this final one in which Zeus probes his very mind. Diomedes is untouchable. Zeus will have to chart a course which gives the Trojans dominance without directly destroying Diomedes. A final word about the actual wording of Hector's taunt. The original Greek has given scholars pause over the years, and there's been a fair amount of debate about it. If you'd like to read more, check out the linked article titled Ancient Views on the Meaning of Daimon in Iliad by D.M. Scheckenveld. That final word Hector uses when he calls out to Diomedes, fate, when he says he's going to deal thee thy fate. The word here translated as fate is the Greek word daimon, from which we get our word demon, and had in ancient Greek somewhat the same meaning as our word, a reference to a minor god or spirit. And this is a strange way to say you're going to kill someone. And this is the only place in all of Homer that this word is used in exactly this way. Hence, the centuries of scholarly debate, which has focused on how best this oddly placed word should be translated. The main options have been, as it appears here, fate, or whether it would be better translated as evil, or for a third and most intriguing option as remembrance. It was this last possibility that caught my attention. The implication that Hector is being particularly vitriolic in his verbal attack on Diomedes because he's inflicting upon Diomedes a remembrance. What could this mean? It had been Diomedes who had rejected the Trojan offer of peace in Book 7. Diomedes had pointed out to the other Greeks that the Trojans were likely only making a peace offer because they were weak and vulnerable to a total Greek victory. Diomedes' argument had been taken up by the other Greek leaders, and Agamemnon had then roundly rejected the Trojan peace offer presented to them by the Trojan herald Idaeus, who must have reported Diomedes' involvement back to the royal court. We can conclude, therefore, that Hector is unusually angry with Diomedes because he knows that this is the man who destroyed Troy's last chance at peace and ultimately sealed his own and his city's fate. A lot of meaning packed into one odd word choice. And Hector with loud shout called to the Trojans, Trojans and Lycians and Dardanians that love close fight, be men, my friends, and bethink you of impetuous valor. I perceive that of good will Cronion vouchsafeth me victory and great glory, and to the Danaans destruction. Fools that devised these walls, weak and of none account, they shall not withhold our fury, and lightly shall our steeds overleap the delved fosse. But when I be once come amid the hollow ships, then be thought taken of consuming fire, that with fire I may burn the ships and slay the men, even the Argives amid their ships, in confusion beneath the smoke. Hector calls out to his allies to attack, and mentions the Greek battlements specifically. Since there was no mention of the Scamander River or of any of the other battlefield landmarks, this is how we know that the rout of the Greeks has crossed the entirety of the battlefield and has reached the Greek defenses, that wall and spike-filled ditch that they built in Book 7. So spake he, and shouted to his steeds, and said, Xanthos, and thou Podargos, and Ithon, and goodly Lampos, now pay me back your tending, even the abundance that Andromache, great-hearted Eetion's daughter, set before you of honey-hearted wheat, and mingled wine to drink, at the heart's bidding, sooner than for me, that verily avow me to be her lusty spouse. Pursue ye now in haste, that we may seize Nestor's shield, the fame whereof now reacheth unto heaven, how that it is of gold throughout, armrods and all, and may seize moreover from horse-taming Diomedes' shoulders his richly dight breastplate that Hephaestus wrought cunningly. Could we but take these, then might I hope this very night to make the Achaeans to embark on their fleet ships. Hector is getting really emboldened. He's very nearly the perfect ideal warrior of the age, and it's only this tendency to get a little loud and braggy when things are going his way that can be considered a flaw in his character. It's not much of a flaw, but it is there, keeping him imperfect and below Diomedes' level. Just file this fact about Hector away in your mind for much, much later in the Iliad. We can tell he's getting loud and braggy because now Hector addresses his horses by name in another speech right after his last speech just moments before. He's telling his horses to pay him back what they owe him for all the care he and his wife have shown them. He plans to capture some very specific pieces of loot from the Greeks. The gold shield of Nestor, and the corslet of Diomedes that was made by Hephaestus. The mention of Diomedes and Nestor's belongings in particular suggests to us that these are the last two Greeks seen streaming into the Greek defenses, which we should now imagine are being shut against the advancing Trojans. Picture the drawbridges across the ditch being raised, the gates through the wall being closed, and armed men posted upon the watchtowers, spears and arrows aimed at the surrounding Trojan army. So spake he boastfully, and Queen Hera had indignation, and stirred her upon her throne, and made high Olympus quake, and answered and said to the great god Poseidon, Out on it, far-swaying shaker of earth! Not even thine heart within thy breast hath pity on the Danaans perishing. Yet bring they to thee in Helice and Aigai offerings many and gracious. Wish thou them victory. Did we but will, we that are confederate with the Danaans, to drive the Trojans back and withhold far-seeing Zeus, then would he vex himself that he should sit there alone in Ida. The scene now shifts to Olympus, where Hera and Poseidon are watching the war unfold. Now that the Greeks have been pushed all the way back to their ships, Hera is angry. She's angry at the Trojans doing well, and she's angry with Hector's boasting, and while she's angry, she's venting to Poseidon and proposing rebellion against Zeus. Hera wants some of the pro-Greek gods to go down immediately to fight off the Trojans, while others confine Zeus to keep him from stopping them. Hera reminds Poseidon of all the offerings the Greeks have made to him. Poseidon is nominally an ally of the Greeks, and there are others. Athene most notably, but also Hermes could conceivably join them. Is Poseidon willing to defy the ban of Zeus and team up with Hera and the others to defend the Greeks? Then was the Lord, the shaker of earth, sore troubled, and made answer. Hera, headstrong in speech, what is this thing thou sayest? I am not he that would fain see us all at strife with Zeus Cronion, for he is mightier far. Thus spake they to each other. No, Poseidon is not willing to go up against Zeus. The guy who just challenged everyone else to a tug of war? That guy's crazy. And while it's not really explained why Zeus is so ridiculously much stronger than all the other gods, which doesn't really make much sense given he's just another brother to many of them like Poseidon here, and yes, brother to Hera as well, ooh, I know, but anyway, you'd think Zeus would be just about as strong as any of the rest of them. But no, it's just held to be true within the Iliad that Zeus really is that much stronger than all the other gods, even all the other gods put together. In other mythological sources, we see challengers to Zeus, but not here. Here in the Iliad, defying Zeus openly is a big mistake, and Poseidon says so to Hera. So it won't be openly that any of the pro-Greek gods will offer help. Not today. The scene shifts back to the battle, where things are going very badly for the Greeks. And now was all the space that from the ships the moat enclosed, even unto the wall, full filled of horses together, and shield-bearing warriors pent. So pent them Hector Priam's son, peer of fleet Ares, now that Zeus vouchsafed him glory. And now had he burned the trim ships with blazing fire, but that Queen Hera put it in Agamemnon's heart, himself to bestir him, and swiftly arouse the Achaeans. So he went his way along the huts and ships of the Achaeans, holding a great cloak of purple in his stalwart hand, and stood by Odysseus's black ship of mighty burden that was in the midst, so that a voice could be heard to either end, whether to the huts of Aias, son of Telamon, or of Achilles, for these had drawn their trim ships up at the uttermost ends, trusting to their manhood and the might of their hands. Then shouted he a far-borne cry, and called to the Danaans aloud, Fie upon you, Argives, ye sorry things of shame, so brave in semblance! Whither are gone our boastings when we said that we were bravest? The boasts ye uttered vaingloriously when in Lemnos, as ye ate your fill of flesh of tall-horned oxen, and drank goblets crowned with wine, and said that every man should stand in war to face 50, yea, 10 Trojans. Yet now can we not match one, even this Hector that anon will burn our ships with flames of fire. O Father Zeus, didst ever thou blind with such a blindness any mighty king, and rob him of great glory? Yet I ween that never in my bent ship passed I by a fair altar of thine on my mad way hither, but upon all I burned fat and thighs of oxen, being eager to lay waste well-walled Troy. Nay, Zeus, this hope fulfill thou me. Suffer that we ourselves, at least, flee and escape. Neither suffer that the Achaeans be thus vanquished of the Trojans. The Greeks have been entirely routed, trapped within their recently built fortifications, and their great numbers have completely filled the walled enclosure, men and horses packed in there. We've gone from the Greeks having the Trojans nearly trapped within their city in Book 6 and barely keeping a foothold outside the city walls, to the Greeks now actually being trapped within their newly built fortifications. Hector has led the Trojans on this absolute rampage, and there's a real threat that he'll burn the Greeks out. Unlike the stone walls of Troy, the walls around the Greek camp are of wood, and their ships are of wood, and Hector's about to start burning it all down now. The survival of the Greeks is in jeopardy. Hera intervenes, alone, without Poseidon. Rather than let Hector put fire to the walls and ships, Hera puts fire instead into Agamemnon's heart to rouse the Greeks. With Hera's support, Agamemnon's heart, at least, is cleared of the panic induced by Zeus that sent them all running across the plains and within their walls. And now, with his courage restored, Agamemnon calls upon the other Greeks to fight. He goes on to rant about how much they've boasted of their courage, but at the end, he prays to Zeus, asking simply that the Greeks themselves survive, even if they have to flee the scene. He may not be able to fight the Trojans alone, but Hera cleared Agamemnon's mind enough that he could pray sincerely and clearly to Zeus. And it's a curious thing in the Iliad that prayers are always answered. Sometimes explicitly answered, sometimes the answer is only seen in the actions of the gods. Sometimes the answer is no, but prayers are always answered. What will Zeus's answer to Agamemnon's prayer be? So spake he, and the Father had pity on him as he wept, and vouchsafed him that his folk should be saved and perish not. Forthwith sent he an eagle, surest sign among winged fowl, holding in his claws a fawn, the young of a fleet hind. Beside the beautiful altar of Zeus he let fall the fawn, where the Achaeans did sacrifice unto Zeus, Lord of all oracles. So when they saw that the bird was come from Zeus, they sprang the more upon the Trojans, and bethought them of the joy of battle. Zeus hears Agamemnon's prayer, and has pity on him. He answers immediately in the affirmative, sending a clear sign that the Greeks will not be destroyed today. An eagle, the bird of Zeus, and long a symbol of power in Western cultures, from the eagle of Zeus in ancient Greece, to the aquila, the eagle standard of the Roman legions, to the eagle as a symbol used by the United States among more than 24 other countries in modern times, the sign of power and freedom, an eagle, flew over the Greek camp. This eagle, sent by Zeus, was carrying a young deer in its talons, which it dropped right on the altar of Zeus within the Greek camp. This is a good sign. This is a very, very good sign, and a clear one. The Greeks hastily, the text doesn't say it, but given the enemy at their gates, one can safely assume it was hasty, performed a sacrifice of this fawn to Zeus, Lord of all oracles. Among the rest of the Greeks, the vast majority not directly involved in making this hasty sacrifice, this sign from Zeus has given them courage, and they now fight with resolve. The panic is over, and the defense of the camp begins in earnest. Did Hera defy Zeus by orchestrating this sequence of events? No, I don't think she did. What Hera did was provide counsel to Zeus, emotional counsel, courage. And this is something that Athene clarified is allowed under the ban against direct involvement of the gods in the war. Hera did the one thing she could in the moments left to her to inspire Agamemnon to do the one thing he could in the moments left to him to save the Greeks. And it worked. Now could no man of the Danaans, for all they were very many, boast that he before Tydeus' son had guided his fleet horses forth, and driven them across the trench, and fought man to man. First by far was Tydides to slay a warrior of the Trojans in full array, even Agelaus, son of Phradmon. Now he had turned his steeds to flee, but as he wheeled the other plunged the spear into his back between his shoulders, and drave it through his breast. So fell he from his chariot, and his armor clanged upon him. The Greeks are back in the fight, but not surprisingly, Diomedes is now the very first to lead the charge back out from within the Greek gates, driving his chariot across the drawbridge, spanning that ditch of spikes. He immediately scores the first kill of this Greek resurgence, one Agelaus, who is a comrade of Acamas, son of the Trojan elder Antenor and Trojan priestess of Athene, Theano. Antenor was the Trojan who had suggested in Book 7 that they give Helen back to the Greeks, a suggestion which Alexandros and Priam quickly rejected, and another callback to the failed peace attempt. Is it a coincidence that it's someone connected to Antenor who is the next named Trojan to die once the war resumed? Not likely. This is the author telling us that the prospect of peace has been well and truly killed off. And after him came Atreus' sons, even Agamemnon and Menelaus, and after them the Iantes, clothed upon with impetuous valor, and after them Idomeneus and Idomeneus' brother in arms Meriones, peer of Enyalios, slayer of men, and after them Eurypylos, Euaemon's glorious son, and ninth came Teucros, stretching his back-bent bow, and took his stand beneath the shield of Aias, son of Telamon. And so Aias would stealthily withdraw the shield, and Teucros would spy his chance. And when he had shot and smitten one in the throng, then fell such an one and gave up the ghost, and Teucros would return, and as a child beneath his mother, so gat he him to Aias, who hid him with the shining shield. More Greeks overcome their panic and return to battle. Menelaus and Agamemnon, the two Iantes, Idomeneus and Meriones, and Eurypylos. The Greeks advance again out from within the wall, but we focus now on Teucros, or Teucer, as his name is often rendered in the Latin tradition. This will be the mini Aristeia of Teucros, so let's take a moment to do a mini biography of this pint-sized hero. Teucros is the half-brother of Aias the Great, aka Telamonian Aias. They share the same father, Telamon, the king of the island of Salamis, which is near Athens. Teucros may be referred in some translations, unfortunately, as a bastard, because his mother is the second wife of Telamon, and herself a Trojan, Hesione, the daughter of the previous king of Troy, Laomedon. Children of second wives or foreign wives, or women who weren't formally married to their husbands, weren't always treated fairly at the time. But Teucros and his half-brother Aias were inseparable and the best of friends, even if they were very different from one another. While Telamonian Aias was a giant, the human wall and great defense in battle of the Greeks, with his massive shield that could stop the enemy in its tracks, Teucros I always imagined as a small guy. Shooting the enemy with his arrows, Teucros could hide behind the shield of Aias the Greater while readying his next arrow. And Teucros is about to start firing off a lot of arrows. Now, who first of the Trojans was slain of noble Teucros? Orsilochos first, and Ormenos, and Ophelestes, and Ditor, and Chromios, and godlike Lycophontes, and Amopaon, Palaimon's son, and Melanippos. All these in turn laid he upon the bounteous earth. And Agamemnon, king of men, rejoiced to behold him making havoc with his stalwart bow of the battalions of the Trojans. And he came and stood by his side and spake to him, saying, Teucros, dear heart, thou son of Telamon, prince of the host, shoot on in this wise, if perchance thou mayest be found the salvation of the Danaans and glory of thy father Telamon, who nurtured thee when thou wast little, and reared thee, though a bastard, in his house. Exalt thou him to honor, though he be afar. Moreover, will say to thee that which shall indeed be fulfilled. If Aegis-bearing Zeus and Athene vouchsafe me to lay waste the established city of Ilios, in thine hand first, after myself, will I bestow the meed of honor, be it a tripod, or 2 steeds with their chariot, or a woman that shall go up into thy bed. Here we have the Aristeia of Teucros. It's not as glorious as Diomedes', and nothing like we'll see from Achilles, but it's fun to imagine little Teucros having his big moment. Unlike those other heroes whose Aristeia are clearly being driven by the power of a god, in both cases Athene, Teucros here seems to be doing this all by himself, without any divine help. And even though I tend to use diminutives when talking about Teucros, Book 8 really is his time to shine, and he dominates with 10 of the 12 named kills in this book. Agamemnon cheers Teucros on, ecstatic at this mighty display of archery as Trojan after Trojan falls dead to the earth. For his present valor in battle, Agamemnon praises Teucros and promises him some choice loot, and probably inappropriately overpromises to Teucros, saying Teucros' rewards will be made just after his own, and therefore ahead of all the other heroes of the Greeks. In addition to overpromising, Agamemnon's praise of Teucros seems a little left-handed. Why bring up the fact that he's a bastard, Agamemnon? Like that's his fault? Throw some insults at his old man if you're such a defender of marriage. Oh wait, the whole story of the Iliad is about you stealing a woman away from another man. Right. To be fair, Agamemnon also mentions how Teucros' father would be proud of his performance in battle right now, and that his father cared for him and raised him in his own home, not an upbringing that illegitimate children always had. But there's a manipulative purpose to Agamemnon's mentioning of Teucros' illegitimate birth. Agamemnon is saying all this in an effort to play upon Teucros' insecurity about his father, to drive Teucros to even greater efforts. And it will work, but it's a little cruel. And noble Teucros made answer and said to him, Most noble son of Atreus, why urgest thou me that am myself eager? Verily, with such strength as is in me, forbear I not. But ever since we drave them towards Ilios, I watch with my bow to slay the foemen. 8 long barbed arrows have I now sped, and all are buried in the flesh of young men swift in battle. Only this mad dog can I not smite. Teucros replies to Agamemnon that there's no need for his encouragement. He's plenty eager to kill him some Trojans, and he's been shooting ever since they returned to battle. I've shot 8 arrows, he said, and all have hit enemy targets. It's only this mad dog, Hector, that seems to evade me, he said, and shot another arrow from the string right against Hector, and his heart was fain to smite him. Yet him he missed. But noble Gorgythion, Priam's good son, he smote with an arrow in the breast, him born of a mother wedded from Icyme, even fair Castianeira, of favor like unto the gods. Even as in a garden a poppy droopeth its head aside, being heavy with fruit and the showers of spring, so bowed he aside his head, laden with his helm. Teucros takes another shot at Hector, and again misses. This is definitely the work of Apollo, turning those arrows away from Hector, because Teucros can aim. But at least Apollo isn't keeping Teucros from scoring hits, because this latest shot ends up killing a fairly unknown son of Trojan King Priam, and himself a bastard, Gorgythion. His name seems to mean something like fast god, and there's a lovely image here of his death, his head drooping like a poppy flower weighted down. Just do an image search of the phrase drooping poppy, and you'll see exactly what the poet intended here, the flower of youth, struck down in the prime of his beauty. And Teucros shot another arrow from the string, right against Hector, and his heart was fain to smite him. Yet missed he once again, for Apollo turned the dart away. But Archeptolemus, Hector's bold charioteer, he smote on the breast beside the nipple as he hasted into battle. So he fell from his car, and his fleet-footed horses swerved aside, and there his soul and spirit were unstrung. Then sore grief encompassed Hector's soul for his charioteer's sake. Yet left he him, though he sorrowed for his comrade, and bade Cebriones, his own brother, being hard by, take the chariot reins, and he heard and disregarded not. And himself he leapt to earth from the resplendent car with a terrible shout, and in his hand he caught a stone, and made right at Teucros, and his heart bade him smite him. Now Teucros had plucked forth from his quiver a keen arrow, and laid it on the string, but even as he drew it back, Hector of the glancing helm smote him with a jagged stone, as he aimed eagerly against him, even beside his shoulder, where the collarbone fences off neck and breast, and where is the most deadly spot. And he brake the bowstring, and his hand from the wrist grew numb, and he stayed fallen upon his knee, and his bow dropped from his hand. But Aias disregarded not his brother's fall, but ran and strode across him and hid him with his shield. When Teucros aims for Hector, Apollo shifts the arrow to kill his chariot driver instead. That's 2 chariot drivers down for Hector in Book 8. With Apollo defending Hector, even during his Aristeia, Teucros isn't going to hit Hector. But losing another chariot driver enrages Hector against Teucros, who draws another arrow, ready to try another shot at Hector. But before Teucros can shoot, Hector comes up with a rock and smashes Teucros right where the neck and collarbone meet. Ouch! Now, of course, this ruins Teucros' ability to shoot, and he drops his bow and falls to the ground. Aristeia over already. Wah wah. Aias stands over Teucros to defend him now, and covers his half-brother with that great tower shield. It's been suggested that Agamemnon's excessive praise and promise of loot to Teucros necessitated this outcome. the end of Teucros' mini Aristeia and the restoration of the norm, which is big brother Aias protecting little brother Teucros. I'm not sure I buy that, but then I always get a big kick out of little Teucros. He'll be back later on, once that collarbone has had a chance to heal. Then 2 trusty comrades bent down to him, even Megistias, son of Echios, and goodly Elastor, and bear him, groaning sorely, to the hollow ships. Injured Teucros is carried away from the battlefield in honor by 2 Greeks, in pain, to the safety of the fortified camp. Strangely enough, for as much as Hector seems like such a major force, and the only major hero of the Trojans, Hector's victory over little Teucros here is one of only 2 really conclusive victories he has in the entire Iliad. As for the second, we'll have to work our way through the deep core to reach it, so stay tuned. And once again, the Olympian aroused the spirit of the Trojans. So they drove the Achaeans straight toward the deep fosse, and amid the foremost went Hector, exulting in his strength. And even as when a hound behind a wild boar or lion, with swift feet pursuing, snatcheth at him, at flank or buttock, and watcheth for him as he wheeleth, so Hector pressed hard on the flowing-haired Achaeans, slaying ever the hindmost, and they fled on. Remember Zeus, perched up there alone on the mountaintop above Troy? He has a promise to fulfill, and he isn't tolerating digressions like the one Hera inspired just minutes ago. Without any preamble, Zeus gives power again to the Trojans. Hector immediately becomes like a hunting dog, pursuing the Greeks even to their defensive ditch and wall, always killing whichever Greek lags farthest behind the rest of them as they run again, the second time this book, for their defenses. But when they were passed in flight through palisade and fosse, and many were fallen beneath the Trojans' hands, then halted they and tarried beside the ships, calling one upon another, and lifting their hands to all the gods prayed each one instantly. But Hector wheeled round his beauteous maned steeds this way and that, and his eyes were as the eyes of Gorgon, or Ares, bane of mortals. The Greeks are back at their ships again already, calling out to one another to see who's still alive, and calling out to the gods for help. Hector is at the gates, wheeling around on his chariot, his eyes crazed like those of a Gorgon or Ares himself. This is a powerful image. Hector mad with rage. Now, at the sight of them, the white-armed goddess Hera had compassion, and anon spake winged words to Athene. Out on it, thou child of aegis-bearing Zeus! Shall not we twain any more take thought for the Danaans that perish, if only for this last time? Now will they fill up the measure of evil destiny, and perish by one man's onslaught, seeing that he is furious now beyond endurance, this Hector son of Priam, and verily hath wrought many a deed of ill. And the bright-eyed goddess Athene made answer to her, Yea, in good sooth, may this fellow yield up strength and life, and perish at the Argives' hands in his native land. Only mine own sire is furious, with no good intent, headstrong, ever sinful, the foiler of my purposes. Neither remembereth he at all those many times and oft that I saved his son, fordone with Eurystheus' tasks. For he would make lament toward heaven, and me would Zeus speed forth from heaven to succor him. Had I but known all this in my prudent heart, what time Eurystheus sent him forth to the house of Hades, the warder of the gate, to bring from Erebos the hound of loathed Hades, then had he not escaped the sheer stream of the water of Styx. But now Zeus hateth me, and fulfilleth the purposes of Thetis, that kissed his knees, and with her hand touched his beard, beseeching him to do honor to Achilles, waster of cities. Verily, the day shall come when he shall call me again his bright-eyed darling. But now make thou ready our whole-hooved horses, while I enter into the palace of aegis-bearing Zeus, and gird me in my armor for battle, that I may see if Priam's son Hector of the glancing helm shall be glad at the appearing of us twain amid the highways of battle. Surely shall many a Trojan likewise glut dogs and birds with fat and flesh, fallen dead at the ships of the Achaeans. The scene shifts back up to Olympus again. This time it's Hera calling upon Athene to help her save the Greeks. Athene gives a long answer saying a few different things. She said she would love to see Hector dead right now, and that Zeus's will is evil, although keep in mind that good and evil were more practical and relative concepts back then. What she means is that Zeus's will is bad for the Greeks. Continuing, Athene says that she doesn't remember how many times she was called to save Zeus's son Heracles, who would never have returned from his quest to Hades if not for her. And we get a rare, for this part of the Iliad anyway, mention of Achilles, when she says that Zeus is still honoring the wishes of Achilles' mother Thetis. That's the only reason he's all about the Trojans right now, which is true. Athene is spot on. This is the major motivation for the whole arc of the Iliad here in Book 8. But finally, Athene says that Zeus will remember that he loves her, so counting on his eventual forgiveness, Athene is willing to join Hera in saving the Greeks now. She's using a strategy that still works today. Act first and seek forgiveness later is oftentimes preferable to seeking permission first, getting told no, and being stymied in your efforts from the start. Athene is the goddess of wisdom, after all. The old band is getting back together, Athene and Hera off to save the day for the Greeks. So said she, and the white-armed goddess Hera disregarded not. So Hera, the goddess queen, daughter of great Kronos, went her way and harnessed the golden front-legged steeds, and Athene, daughter of aegis-bearing Zeus, cast down at her father's threshold her woven vesture many-colored, that herself had wrought and her hands had fashioned, and put on her the tunic of Zeus the cloud-gatherer, and arrayed her in her armor for dolorous battle. Upon the flaming chariot set she her foot, and grasped her spear great and stout, wherewith she vanquished the ranks of men, even of heroes with whom she of the awful sire is wroth. Then Hera swiftly smote the horses with the lash, self-moving groaned upon their hinges the gates of heaven, whereof the hours are warders, to whom is committed great heaven and Olympos, whether to throw open the thick cloud or set it to. There through the gates guided they their horses, patient of the lash. Like they've done before, Hera and Athene gear up for war, mount their chariot, and go flying out the gates of Olympus, Hera lashing the divine horses to fly as fast as they can for the battlefield of Troy. But when Father Zeus beheld from Ida, he was sore wroth, and sped Iris, golden-winged, to bear a message. Go thy way, fleet Iris, turn them back, neither suffer them to face me, for in no happy wise shall we join in combat. For thus will I declare, and even so shall the fulfillment be. I will maim their fleet horses in the chariot, and them will I hurl out from the car, and will break in pieces the chariot. Neither within the courses of 10 years shall they heal them of the wounds the thunderbolt shall tear, that the bright-eyed one may know the end when she striveth against her father. But with Hera have I not so great indignation nor wrath, seeing it is ever her wont to thwart me, whatever I have decreed. But even from his perch atop Mount Ida, Zeus sees that Hera and Athene are about to disobey him, and sends Iris to them, saying that he will strike their chariot horses with lightning if they proceed to enter the battle now, and smash their chariots and hurl them falling from the sky. Hera and Athene will be so messed up, even after 10 years, they won't have recovered from the wounds. That's some abusive household stuff, Zeus. With Hera, he's not mad because she's always disobeying, but he's especially upset. This disobedience from Athene, being something new, is enough to really tick him off. So said he, and whirlwind-footed Iris arose to bear the message, and departed from the mountains of Ida unto high Olympus. And even at the entrance of the gates of Olympus, many-folded she met them, and stayed them, and told them the saying of Zeus. Whither hasten ye? Why are ye hearts furious within your breasts? Cronides forbiddeth you to give the Argives succor. For thus the son of Kronos threateneth, even as he will fulfill, to wit, to maim your fleet horses in the chariot, and you will he hurl from out the car, and break the chariot in pieces. Neither within the courses of 10 years shall ye heal you of the wounds that the thunderbolt shall tear, that thou, bright-eyed goddess, mayest know the end when thou striveth against thy father. But with Hera hath he not so great indignation nor wrath, seeing it is ever her wont to thwart him, whatever he have decreed. But most fell art thou, reckless vixen, if thou indeed wilt dare to lift thy huge spear against the face of Zeus. So said fleet-footed Iris, and departed. But Hera spake to Athene, and said, Out on it, thou child of aegis-bearing Zeus. I verily would no more have us war against Zeus for mortals' sake. Of them let one man perish and another live, even as the lot falleth, and for him let him take counsel for himself in his heart, and give judgment for Trojans and for Danaans, as is meet. So saying, she turned back her whole-hooved horses. Then the Hours unyoked them their beauteous-maned horses, and tethered them to their ambrosial mangers, and leant the chariots against the shining faces of the gateway. And the goddesses sate them upon their golden thrones, amid the throng of all the gods, and were grieved at heart. Iris reached Hera and Athene with Zeus's message, which they received in silence. Once Iris had departed, Hera turned to Athene and said they should back down, and so they do. And that's all it takes. Zeus rules with constant threats of violence, and the domination of the Trojans continues unhindered. The goddesses return to the divine stables, and the horses and chariot are put away by a group of goddesses known as the Hours, who were the personifications of the seasons, while Hera and Athene return to the main throne room of Olympus. And Father Zeus drave from Ida his fair-wheeled chariot and horses unto Olympus, and came unto the session of the gods. For him also the noble shaker of earth unyoked the steeds, and sat the car upon the stand, and spread a cloth thereover. And far-seeing Zeus himself sate upon his golden throne, and beneath his feet great Olympus quaked. Only Athene and Hera sat apart from Zeus, and spake no word to him, neither questioned him. But he was ware thereof in his heart, and said, Why are ye thus vexed, Athene and Hera? Surely ye are not wearied of making havoc in glorious battle of the Trojans, for whom ye cherish bitter hate. Howsoever, seeing that my might is so great and my hands invincible, all the gods that are in Olympus could not turn me. And for you twain, trembling erstgat, hold upon your bright limbs, ere that ye beheld war and war's fell deeds. For thus will I declare, and even so had the fulfillment been. Never had ye, once smitten with the thunderbolt, fared on your chariots back unto Olympus, where is the habitation of the immortals. So Zeus flies back to Olympus in his chariot, where Poseidon takes care of his horses, probably in his role as god of horses, although it's a bit weird that Poseidon, a really major god, is working stable duty at all, and especially right now, because we know that the Hours were working the stable just minutes before. So is Poseidon doing some brown-nosing here, making sure that he stays on Zeus's good side? Who knows? Zeus then joins the other gods in the throne room, where Hera and Athene sit in silence apart, not acknowledging his arrival at all. Zeus asks why they're mad at him, sarcastically asking if they're all worn out from causing trouble for the Trojans. That joke falls flat. Not even Zeus, on his throne in Olympus, is going to get a laugh from that. Zeus then points out to Hera and Athene that he would have stopped them before they'd even made it to the battle. So spake he, and Athene and Hera murmured that were sitting by him and devising ills for the Trojans. Now Athene held her peace, and said not anything, for wrath at Father Zeus, and fierce anger gat hold upon her. But Hera's heart contained not her anger, and she spake, Most dread son of Cronos, what word is this thou hast said? Well know we, even we, that thy might is nowise puny. Yet still we have pity for the Danaan spearmen, that shall now perish, and fill up the measure of grievous fate. Yet will we refrain from battle, if thou biddest us, but counsel we will offer to the Argives, such as shall profit them, that they perish not all at thy wrath. At Zeus's gloating, Hera and Athene are muttering among themselves, plotting what harm they could do to the Trojans. Athene can keep herself quiet, but Hera just can't. That's not who she is. Hera feels the need to speak up, and she reminds Zeus that they haven't forgotten his strength. They're just upset that so many good Greeks will die because of his anger. Which is fair. Zeus had asked them why they were even mad at him, which had been a stupid thing to ask. They're mad because the Greeks are dying, and he's keeping them from protecting the Greeks. And Hera reiterates Athene's former statement that they're still going to offer counsel to the Greeks, even if he doesn't allow them to offer direct help. And Zeus, the cloud gatherer, answered and said, At morn shalt thou behold most mighty Cronion, if thou wilt have it so, O Hera, ox-eyed queen, making yet more havoc of the vast army of Argive spearmen. For headlong Hector shall not refrain from battle, till that Peleus' son, fleet of foot, have arisen beside the ships. That day when these shall fight amid the sterns, in most grievous stress around Patroclus, fallen. Such is the doom of heaven, and for thine anger reck I not even thou, go to the nethermost bounds of earth and sea, where sit Iapetos and Kronos, and have no joy in the beams of Hyperion the sun god, neither in any breeze, but deep Tartaros is round about them. Though thou shouldst wander till thou come even thither, yet reck I not of thy vexation, seeing there is no thing more unabashed than thou. Zeus responds to Hera with a prophecy, and with what might seem like a big story spoiler for us. But it's something we're supposed to know now, and there's no getting around it. Zeus proclaims that Hector won't be stopped until Achilles fights him over the dead body of Patroclus. This is fate, Zeus says to Hera. I don't care about your anger. And even if you go off sulking to the depths of Tartaros, Hera, I still wouldn't care about how you feel in this matter. So here, within the context of a dysfunctional and abusive Olympian family conversation, we get another important plot movement from Zeus, whose role throughout Book 8, first at the beginning and now here near the end, has been to clarify for us where we're going with the Iliad. We're not even one full book into a long sequence of battle books, and it will be easy for us to lose our way in the melee of war. Let's remember the signposts that Zeus has put up for us here in 8. These signposts are that 1, no other gods will disrupt his plan for the war. Now, that's not to say the other gods won't have any further involvement, far from it. But ultimately, Zeus's plan for the war will be borne out. And 2, Zeus's plan involves Hector remaining unstoppable until Patroclus is killed. Now, remember that Achilles' prayer to Zeus was to inflict suffering upon the Greeks for Agamemnon's dishonoring of him. Zeus is indeed answering that prayer. The Greeks will suffer. Zeus is going to continue empowering Hector. But the death of Patroclus was entirely Zeus's idea. Achilles would never have asked for that, and his prayer certainly didn't include any wish for Patroclus to suffer. But in the Iliad, prayers are always answered. Sometimes the answer isn't quite what you asked for. We, you and I, are in on the secret now, and along with the gods, we will watch the tragedy unfold among the mortals below. So said he, but white-armed Hera spake him no word, and the sun's bright light dropped into ocean, drawing black night across earth the grain-giver. Against the Trojans' will daylight departed, but welcome, thrice prayed for, to the Achaeans came down the murky night. Hera is silent, giving Zeus no response. Back on the battlefield, night falls on the Trojans and the Greeks. The Trojans would have been happy if the day had continued, so well was the battle going for them. But the Greeks are glad for the end of this day and a reprieve from the fighting. Now, glorious Hector made an assembly of the Trojans, taking them apart from the ships, beside the eddying river, in an open space, where was found a spot clear of dead. And they came down from their chariots to the ground, to hear the word that Hector, dear unto Zeus, proclaimed. He in his hand held his spear 11 cubits long. In front thereof gleamed the spearhead of bronze, and a ring of gold ran round it. Thereon he leaned, and spake to the Trojans, saying, Hearken to me, Trojans and Dardanians and allies. I thought but now to make havoc of the ships, and all the Achaeans, and depart back again to windy Ilios. But dusk came too soon, and that in chief hath now saved the Argives, and the ships beside the beach of the sea. So let us now yield to black night, and make our supper ready. Unyoke ye from the chariots your fair-maned horses, and set fodder beside them. And from the city bring kine and goodly sheep with speed, and provide you with honey-hearted wine, and corn from your houses, and gather much wood withal, that all night long until early springing dawn we may burn many fires, and the gleam may reach to heaven, lest perchance even by night the flowing-haired Achaeans strive to take flight over the broad back of the sea. Verily must they not embark upon their ships unvexed, at ease. But see ye that many a one of them have a dart to nurse even at home, being stricken with arrow or keen-pointed spear as he leapeth upon his ship, so that many another man may dread to wage dolorous war on the horse-taming men of Troy. And let the heralds dear to Zeus proclaim throughout the city that stripling boys and old men of hoary heads camp round the city on the battlements builded of the gods. And let the women folk burn a great fire each in her hall. And let there be a sure watch set, lest an ambush enter the city when the host is absent. Thus be it, great-hearted Trojans, as I proclaim. The counsel that now is sound, let that stand spoken. Further will I proclaim at dawn, amid the horse-taming men of Troy. I pray with good hope to Zeus and all the gods, to drive from hence these dogs, borne onward by the fates, them that the fates bear on in the black ships. Howbeit, for the night we will guard our own selves, and at morn by daybreak, arrayed in our armor, let us awake keen battle at the hollow ships. I will know whether Tydeus' son, stalwart Diomedes, shall thrust me from the ships back to the wall, or I shall lay him low with my spear and bear away his gory spoils. Tomorrow shall he prove his valor, whether he can abide the onslaught of my spear. But he, amid the foremost, I ween, shall lie stricken, and many comrades round about their lord at the rising of tomorrow's sun. Would that I were immortal and ageless all my days, and honored like as Athene is honored, and Apollo, so surely as this day bringeth the Argives ill. Hector, still feeling braggy, assembles the Trojans and says that the night has saved the Greeks, and that they should send to Troy for animals to eat, and that they should have many campfires and stay on the field overnight, to prevent the Greeks from getting into their ships and fleeing. He continues in a really long speech to make a couple of points. He wants the boys and old men of the city to keep watch, and the women to keep fires lit in their homes. And Hector calls out Diomedes specifically, wanting to see whether Diomedes can push Hector back to the city of Troy, or whether he can kill Diomedes himself. Diomedes really has been the standout warrior of the Greeks so far. His Aristeia, which is one of the better ones, has already happened, and Diomedes was immune to the otherwise general panic among the Greeks at the beginning of Book 8. Hector's sights are focused on Diomedes for now, but eventually his attention will shift to another warrior, as yet unseen upon the battlefield during the Iliad. So Hector made harangue, and the Trojans clamored applause, and they loosed their sweating steeds from the yoke, and tethered them with thongs, each man beside his chariot. And from the city they brought kine and goodly sheep with speed, and provided them with honey-hearted wine and corn from their houses, and gathered much wood withal, and sacrificed to the immortals unblemished hecatombs. And from the plain the winds bare into heaven the sweet savour. But the blessed gods regaled not themselves, nor would they aught thereof, for sore was holy Ilios hated of them, and Priam, and the folk of Priam of the good ashen spear. But these with high hopes sate them all night along the highways of the battle, and their watchfires burned in multitude, even as when in heaven the stars about the bright moon shine clear to see when the air is windless, and all the peaks appear, and the tall headlands and glades, and from heaven breaketh open the infinite air, and all the stars are seen, and the shepherd's heart is glad. Even in like multitude between the ships and the streams of Xanthos appeared the watchfires that the Trojans kindled in front of Ilios. 1,000 fires burned in the plain, and by the side of each sate 50 in the gleam of blazing fire. And the horses champed white barley and spelt, and standing by their chariots waited for the throned dawn. The Trojans offer sacrifice, but it says here that the gods will have no part of it, as the Trojans are hateful to them. And the text doesn't really say why the gods don't accept their sacrifice. This used to mystify me until I started reading Book 8 through the lens of the Zeus and the thorn in his side theory. We, as the Greek sympathizing audience, are fed up at this point. Our heroes have been chased back to their ships, and those braggy, undeserving Trojans are lording it over us by camping out in the open, unafraid of us. We're mad. We're disgusted with the Trojans, and so we automatically assume that the gods are disgusted with them as well, and reject their sacrifice. Meanwhile, the Trojans light numerous campfires across the plain, a threatening sight to the Greeks penned up within their wall. 50,000 Trojans and their allies, in defiance of us, ready to slaughter us and burn our ships in the morning. Fortunately for the Greeks, this will be a very long night. It was a short reversal of fortune for the Greeks. In the span of a single book, the Trojans have come to dominate the field to an extent that we haven't yet seen in the Iliad. Neither side has ever felt confident enough to actually camp outside before. Notice it was Hector, braggy Hector, who made that decision. This is the final complaint that's been lodged against Book 8, the hasty reversal of fortunes. But this just makes us all the more angry. An arbitrary decision by Zeus, an incredibly quick turnaround, Hector bragging throughout, the Trojans being bold enough to camp right outside like they're not even afraid of us anymore. Everything about Book 8 is designed to enrage. Everything about Zeus's actions in Book 8 is designed to make us angry. But like Hera, there's nothing we can do about it. And Zeus doesn't care how we feel. When we continue the fight, and we most certainly will, things will get ugly. And we won't be thinking about honor or fair conduct or mercy towards the Trojans. We'll be thinking about revenge. We can't get back at Zeus, that's futile, but we can take our anger out on the Trojans. We'll be thinking about wiping the smiles off those smug Trojan faces. Zeus is finally fulfilling his promise to Achilles. He's brought on the suffering, and we're feeling it already. We're aching for revenge, but that revenge is a long way off. And what we, the audience, now know, along with the gods, is that the most aching, most heartbreaking outcome possible is awaiting Achilles as a direct result of his wrathful prayer. The death of Patroclus is coming, but we have a lot more aching to do first. This is the end of Book 8. Next time, we'll cover Book 9, called by Malcolm Wilcock, author of A Companion to the Iliad, in many ways the finest in the Iliad. And like 8, a strong return to the main plot before we plunge fully into the deep dark of Book 10. We're in a really strong sequence of books here, and I hope you'll join me. Until next time, this has been Daniel with Your Mythology Book Club. Thanks for listening.